Ooh. Uh-oh. Ta-da! Hello, artist friends! I am trying to make these videos as useful as possible for you, so if you could do me a favor and watch the whole thing, let me know what parts of the video are your favorite and least favorite in the comment section. That would help out a bunch. Thank you so much, and we're gonna get on with the video. There are lots of different textures present in the world, but to get started, we will focus on a few of the textures most commonly found in fantasy art. For the demonstration, we will be using 3 colors in each of these textures, but more colors can be used to achieve deeper, more realistic textures in your own work. In creating a wood texture, we will mostly focus on straight lines with some subtle curves and occasional knots. It might help to think of these lines as eyes, elongated C's, and maybe an O in the center of a knot. We begin by lightly shading the whole texture area with our 3 colors to suggest a bit of form through simple light and shadow. This step is important to the demonstration process because it adds a sense of form to my flat square, and textures flow along forms, adding detail. Using light pressure, we sketch in some wood grain lines using our dark color and define the ones we like most with hard pressure. The lines are mostly straight, but it's okay and maybe even preferable if they wiggle a little bit. Make sure to add variation to the placement, length, and starting points of these lines, as that will make the texture look more believable. With our medium color and light to medium pressure, we color along the dark lines we sketched, extending the lines with less definition to suggest that they are becoming more shallow and ceasing to exist as they flow further away from the darkest, deepest points. We can also add new grain lines with this color, which will add a bit of variation to the wood grain. Switching to the light color, we will begin to shade along the grain lines and add some rich brown color to the wood. If desired, we can add some light lines to the texture area. Now that the drawing portion of this texture is complete, we will focus on using all of the colors to finalize the value and saturation of our wood texture. In order to create more realistic wood textures, we should study wood in real life, or at the very least use photo references. Wood texture can be used to tell a story of its own within your coloring image. If you want to see more wood texturing in action, check out the advanced coloring video above. Scales can be found on armor, dragons, and various monsters. Scales are like overlapping plates of natural armor and can be varied in design. For the purposes of our demonstration, we will create a simple U or V-shaped scale texture where the scales are also raised up along their vertical center, which would deflect attacks to the left or right. Since scales overlap each other, we want to stagger them in horizontal rows, with the scales of the second row beginning and ending at the bottom center of the V or U curve of the first row's scales. We will continue this pattern all the way through our texture before starting the coloring. Scales flow along forms like any other texture, so they will not typically be laid flat and straight as they are for this demonstration. To suggest a bit of form, we will begin by lightly shading the texture area with all 3 colors. Let's start with one scale to demonstrate the process before moving on to the whole section. Using the dark color, we deepen the outline along the darker side and bottom of the scale, then begin shading from the edge toward the center point. Switch to medium and continue the color shading process on the dark side, and add definition to the lighter edge while making sure to leave the light half of the scales lighter with space for the light color. Using the light color, we work on the darker side of the scale, adding saturation and blending the layers that have already been placed. In the lighter area, we work at adding form through shading and leave a small white highlight open to suggest a shiny scale. With all 3 colors, we work to refine and add a bit more definition to the scale along the edges and that raised center ridge. This can be a back and forth process with the colors as we gradually build up to our desired look for the scale. With the first scale completed, we will work through the rest of the texture in the same way, increasing the size of the highlight area as we work toward the light center of the texture box. Note that the scales cast a little shadow onto the layer below. The bigger and thicker your scales are, the more shadow they should cast, while smaller scales will cast smaller, more subtle shadows. Most animals and lots of armor or clothing will feature fur or hair of some type. Fur can be a variety of colors, lengths, and thicknesses. For this demonstration, we will focus on average length brown fur. Our fur lines can be similar to a mixture of V's, I's, and maybe even R's. What's important is that we express a wavy, non-uniform flow to the fur. Note that the fur is the hardest texture from this group to demonstrate in a flat box, as the tufts or lines will follow the form of the object the fur is draped over. Shading the area to suggest a bit of form with all three colors helps to alleviate a bit of that flatness and inform the flow of our texture pattern. With the box shaded, we will start with our dark color and sketch some fur lines in the dark to medium areas of our texture. Medium color for the medium to light fur lines, and the light color for the lightest fur lines. Fur usually isn't shiny, but it can be somewhat reflective at its most highlighted points, and the lightest areas should have fewer or even no fur lines unless there is a significant form there that needs to be made distinct. In this demonstration, we work on the right side of the box before coloring the left side. Using the dark color, we will add definition to the darkest fur lines and begin shading, adding a sense of depth to the areas furthest from the central light spot. The medium color adds to the brown in the darker areas and can be used with hard pressure to further define the medium fur lines. We use the light color to define the lighter lines, shade towards the lightest point, and add some richness to the darker areas of the texture. Switching back to the dark color, we add small soft shadows on the dark side of our fur lines to help suggest more form and fluffiness to the fur texture, like each section of lines is stacked on top of the other. Working through each of the colors, we refine and finalize the right side of the texture a bit more before starting the process over on the left side. Again, using the colors to darken their respective lines, add shadows, shade, and color the whole area. With the entire box textured, we continue working through the colors to refine the texture and unify the color throughout. Chainmail is a pretty common texture to find in fantasy art, and it can be one of the most tedious textures to create. Proper chainmail typically uses a 5-link pattern, but can also be more complex. As you can see, drawing all of these links could drive us insane, and I have massive respect for the people that actually put this together by hand. There are several ways to suggest the chainmail texture in our art with varying degrees of success. First, the alternating C pattern is very common and works well in suggesting the texture and adding complexity to the image. The bottom edge or U pattern is sometimes used and works okay. The O pattern is more akin to ring mail, but it also works. For our demonstration, we will focus on the alternating C pattern. We start by very lightly sketching lines across our chainmail area to break our chainmail down into rows. Once we have all of the rows sketched, we will shade the texture area, leaving a highlight down the center. Here we are using black, blue, and gray to simulate the color of the steel chain, but the colors can be altered by lighting and material. We draw C's on every other line working through the texture, then do the backwards C's on the lines in between. Sketching the pattern this way can help to ensure that we don't go the wrong way when we start a new row. Next, we darken in the C's with black in the darkest areas and only darken the bottom of the C's as we move towards the highlight, as we don't want the links to be too defined in the shiny area. Most of the coloring here is focused on shading the form that the chainmail is covering instead of shading the links themselves. But we will also use a little bit of the light gray and blue to add a touch of definition to the bottom edges of the rows. Note that this texturing method is meant for small detail areas rather than depicting chainmail up close, so the texture becomes more effective as we zoom out. For a practical demonstration of some of these texturing techniques on a coloring page, check out the Color Along Page 2 Basic Plus and Color Along Page 3 Advanced Coloring videos. Magic is more of a special effect than a texture, but it is an important part of many fantasy images, so let's talk about the different types of magic we might want to color or create. Magic is typically considered to be chaos energy harnessed and focused to perform the bidding of the character using it. As such, it usually glows and has some type of pattern based on what it is. For our demonstration, we will cover the gaseous glow, fire, lightning, and blast. Experiment to see what other types of magic and variations you can implement in your art. The gaseous glow is a wavy magic effect that encircles something like a staff or hand and flows like a cloud of gas. Since it is a glow, it will have a deeper color at the outer edges and transition through bright colors until becoming white at the center. Fire is technically another form of glowing gas, but fire tends to burn upward and ends in pointy tails. It is colored with red at the outer edges, then shifts through orange and yellow to white at its hottest central point. Fire could also be blue or green, but the process is similar. Lightning is a cleaner, more concentrated type of energy. It shoots off in thin tendrils that might fork out several times before terminating in pointy tails. Like the other magic types, lightning glows from the center, with its deepest colors being applied along the outer edges. Note that lightning bolts should typically be thicker near their core and thinner as they fork out. Blast magic is a type of magic that is radiating in a fairly even manner or exploding from a central point. We can depict the outward expansion of the blast magic with straight lines that radiate toward the center of the energy. Typically, we do not want to continue these lines all the way to the center, as we want to demonstrate that the energy is flowing outward from that point. Again, we will use our darkest colors at the farther points from the center and transition towards white at the center. This video marks the conclusion of the essential coloring skills needed to tackle any fantasy coloring project. Keep practicing, making art, and learning. If there is a texture or colored pencil technique you would like to see me demonstrate in a future video, let me know in the comments section below. I am happy to help if I can. My next colored pencil video will focus on using textures to alter a coloring page from its intended appearance. See you there, and happy coloring. One last thing before I head out, I want to let you know you're doing awesome. Any struggle you might be encountering with your art right now is a natural part of the process and is only obvious to you because of your increased abilities. So don't get discouraged. Keep being an awesome artist and be proud of your accomplishments. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Embark on a coloring journey like never before with Fantasy Coloring Book Number 1, A Coloring Adventure. Immerse yourself in the magical world of 32 intricately designed pages, each a masterpiece waiting for your personal touch. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just discovering the joy of coloring, Fantasy Coloring Book Number 1 is the perfect canvas for your creativity. Let your imagination soar as you add your personal flair to these enchanting illustrations. Order yours today and unlock the door to a world of fantasy, one page at a time. Discover a world where art comes alive at ericperkinsart.etsy.com, your destination for original art, digital downloads, and more. Dive into a gallery filled with the imagination and talent of artist Eric Perkins. From breathtaking originals to digital downloads that spark creativity, there's something for every fantasy art lover. If you're looking for instant inspiration, our digital downloads are just a click away. Elevate your projects with high-quality downloadable art that reflects your style and vision. Visit ericperkinsart.etsy.com today. Join me on Patreon, where you will gain access to full-size, high-resolution image downloads, a special look behind the scenes of my projects, regular updates, monthly fantasy coloring pages, and more. Patreon.com/ericperkinsartist.